Good day to all you fellow mates and adventurers. My name is Mordecai, and welcome to the Institute of Supernatural Arcane Affairs. I will be your narrator for today, where we analyse various RPG-related stories for potential considerations that can be applied to tabletop role-playing. One of my favourite franchises of all time would have to be the Pokemon franchise, even if it has taken some questionable decisions in recent times. I haven't forgotten that they effectively removed half of all of the Pokemon in the mainline games starting from the release of Sword and Shield, although that might be due to technical issues, which we can only hope gets resolved in the near future. However, it means that, until that happens, if Pokemon fans want to be able to play with a full Pokédex in order to catch them all, it means that they will have to look into alternative methods. So naturally, I got excited when I learnt about the fan-developed Pokemon Tabletop United system, which combines a tabletop role-playing experience with Pokemon in a seemingly cohesive manner. However, something that we need to keep in perspective with regards to bringing Pokemon into a tabletop role-playing experience is that many of the potential issues that can affect tabletop role-playing are still present. These include problem players causing issues for the table, people forgetting about mechanics, or even cheating. And perhaps all three issues could occur at the same time. So what problems do our intrepid Pokemon trainers encounter at the table in today's story? Let's find out as we embark on another delve. Before we begin with today's story, if you like my content or want to support the channel, feel free to subscribe and leave a like on the video. It's free to do, and every bit of support is highly appreciated. Plus, you can always change your mind at a later date. For now, please enjoy. Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPGHorrorStories. Today's narrative is titled The Blank Sheet, and is written by user Evil Tiny Wolf. This is the ballad of my first time attempting to DM a game. About 10 years ago, my boyfriend, now husband, wanted to get me into Dungeons & Dragons. I'd had a very negative first experience to the game, so he coaxed me into it by introducing me to his college's D&D club as they played a Pokemon tabletop game. The game was largely homebrewed and horribly broken, but the whole club followed the same rules. After being a player for a few games, I felt confident in running my own. I drew my own maps, created my own central hub city, and had a running joke plot about the mayor being unable to build a Pokemon stadium. The players had all been summoned by the city's professor, who needed research assistance that could act as communication with one of their excavation teams, as they worked in an area with no cell phone signal. Before the game started, I made spreadsheets to track the party's money and their character subclass options. For the most part, the game went great. Since it was my first game, I limited the game to 4 players. My boyfriend made a juggler, and the others made a martial artist, a photographer, and a breeder. A breeder was my favourite to play, and I personally have made multiple characters with various subclasses, so I was very familiar with the class and how the class worked. So in the early levels, I helped her with the class and backed off when she seemed to have the hang of it. I was sadly not aware that this particular player would end up being my problem. The breeder in my game was the only other girl in the group. I ended up finding out that because she had been the only girl before my arrival, she was used to special treatment. Special treatment that she had assumed that I would give her too. The Pokemon tabletop game we used had an interesting method of handling experience points. EXP was given as 2 separate numbers. Trainers got character EXP, which would level up their class, and you could pick which order subclass skills were learned. Pokemon got experience that the trainer could divvy out however they chose. So you got a total number of Pokemon experience, but if that number went all to one Pokemon or got split up was to the trainer. You could theoretically use one Pokemon in a fight and give all of the experience to another that wasn't in the battle. Breeders also got a percentage boost to Pokemon experience to help level up baby Pokemon faster, and how much of a boost was dependent on which subclass features the player had picked up for their character. As mentioned before, I had a spreadsheet where I kept track of which subclass options the party had been picking. Whenever I told the party their experience, I had a separate number I was telling Breeder based on which options I knew she had. I'd mostly been tracking this information, so I could make sure I was leading into the skills the party had shown interest in. The juggler wanted to do more damage based on which type of Pokeball he threw. I had a shopkeep who could craft Pokeballs from acorns and randomly set up areas on the map where acorns could be found. The photographer wants to learn moves he's captured on film. The professor could help him upgrade his camera in downtime so he could develop the film faster. Then came the final fight. I'd been dropping hints about the two Team Rocket grunts the party had run into multiple times. My boyfriend and the martial artist appeared to be the only ones who had figured out that the duo were in fact a red herring. The martial artist used his in-character knowledge to speculate his theory to the party that one of the grunts had a powerful psychic-type Pokemon. The first round of combat, Breeder threw out the level 1 bug-type she'd hatched on the way to the encounter. The whole table was horrified. We hadn't had any combat since the egg had hatched, so it was definitely a level 1, and its only stats were what the Pokemon starts with, plus her breeder bonuses. But it was the final fight, and she insisted she'd rolled really well on her bonuses, so I assumed she'd made a glass cannon. The party got hit by a few attacks, but they had been healing so the players staying up didn't seem too odd. But the level 1 staying up was a red flag. I asked to see its sheet. She tried to deflect, saying that the Pokemon was low but still up, and tried to refuse. The refusal was an even bigger red flag, so I got up from my seat and went to her side of the table. What I saw killed any enjoyment I'd been having from the session. Her sheet was blank. Entirely blank. As were a few of her other sheets. Her own character sheet hadn't been updated in several levels, probably not since I'd backed off from helping her with the class. Came to find out, she had stopped tracking anything months ago, except to add fun things to her inventory. She'd heal when she felt it appropriate, or would let Pokemon be knocked out when she thought it made sense, but hadn't been writing down health, experience, or even her own character abilities for months. She rolled stats of level ups with everyone else and just never wrote them down. No one had ever checked her character sheets before, so I was the first DM to ever look at any of her sheets after the first session of character creation. In front of the club, she had just admitted that this was the first game where she'd ever actually written anything on her sheet past getting her character approved. She just brought extra sheets of paper with her to sessions, so she'd have papers to rustle through behind her screen during combat. The only thing she'd ever referencing was the subclass options. Since players were allowed to pick what order they gained skills, she would just pull whatever sounded beneficial to what was currently happening. As long as it was a skill from her class or subclass, no one had ever questioned it before. I ended the combat there. Gave an epilogue that was functionally a bad end. The party got to still beat the bad guy, but at a horrible cost. After that, she hated me. Every campaign she was in, she had DMs suddenly checking her sheet at the beginning and end of every session to make sure she was actually keeping track of health and consumable items. She blamed me for the new problems she was having after years of playing with this group without any issues. The boyfriend upgraded himself to fiancé and finally convinced me to run my campaign again with an entirely new group. I moved the game to an online format so I could see character sheets, and fiancé stepped up as a co-DM since he already knew the main story beats. He helped with combat encounters, which allowed me to further go gremlin mode on my spreadsheets. I made most of the spreadsheets visible to the party so everyone could see what information was being tracked. I finally got to do a happy ending to the campaign, and one of my players liked my story enough to do a spin-off sequel where her character from my game had gone on to become a professor, and we all made characters who were trainers she was now mentoring. The professor from my game even got referenced as being consulted for advice at a few stages. And that's where the story ends. Something that does strike me as an odd choice for the club is that everyone at the table had their own version of the DM screen, a tabletop object usually used to keep certain information private and away from the player's eyes, such as plot beats and potential hooks. So why did the players have their own private screens? Well, a commenter on the post was curious enough to ask why personal screens were allowed at the tables at the club. In response, the poster elaborated with the following. Everyone having their own screen was fairly normal for everyone in the club. Since multiple people ran games, most of the club members had their own screens, and it was common for players to clip some of their notes to their private boards. Prior to running my own game, the club president had shown me where I could buy my own screen, and I had used it to keep track of in-game calendars or more detailed descriptions of class features. When I had played as a breeder previously, it also helped keep track of egg hatch time and ingredients for crafting healing items. I only really had my one bad introduction to Dungeons & Dragons and my experience with the club as examples, so I didn't realise personal screens weren't common until much later. After my campaign ended in the way it did, the president invested in dice trays, and screens were only allowed if you were sharing it with another person. And that's where the individual DM screens for the players came from. Whilst I can definitely see the practicality behind having a personal screen for taking notes and staying organised, it is pretty obvious that both more and less was happening behind the breeder's personal screen. Mostly cheating, largely aided by not taking notes and not staying on top of what was actually happening once all eyes were diverted. Which strikes me as extremely odd for several reasons. One of the potential draws for a long-term tabletop roleplayer is the accumulation of multiple character sheets, and being able to recall favourite moments and to retell their tales in the future. And that process is made a lot harder by having a series of completely blank character sheets. How the breeder was able to play somewhat normally whilst writing nothing down is beyond me. I have to wonder what they were thinking. It just doesn't make sense outside of cheating, which the breeder evidently had been doing for a long time. The breeder has basically no one to blame but themselves for bringing down the hammer upon themselves as a result of cheating. It was a matter of when and not if they would be caught. Which brings us to another issue. Why was the breeder cheating in multiple campaigns? Was allowing her to cheat the special treatment that she was used to receiving? The only thing I can think of is that maybe the breeder wanted to be able to claim that they took on an endgame encounter with a low-level Pokemon. But that still doesn't justify the whole write nothing down and ruffle papers to make it look like notes are being written down. There's a difference between having a blank character sheet because a player just wants a simple character with no fuss, versus having multiple blank sheets for the purposes of blatant cheating. In terms of considerations for the table, the biggest consideration is how any form of cheating can negatively impact the experience for everyone at the table, including the cheater. As a direct result of the breeder's cheating, the personal screens had been rescinded at the club, and everyone has since been keeping a constant vigil on their character sheets, which is all the more reason why one should not cheat at the table. Feel free to post your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed my content and would like to see more, feel free to subscribe and give the video a like. It's free to do, and every bit of support is highly appreciated. Plus, you can always change your mind at a later date. And with that, I shall see you all next time.